Well, good evening, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Grant Goslin, and I serve as Director of Undergraduate Admission here at Boston College. And on behalf of our entire panel, I welcome you to the Show at 6, BC and the Common Good. The Show at 6 features friends and members of the BC community discussing a wide range of issues affecting our world today, all revolving around the theme of the common good. Topics include how the BC community is responding to the effects of COVID-19, to the enduring challenges of the marginalized, to our own resiliency and solidarity, and to the upbuilding of human dignity throughout the world. The show is based on the central insight of the common good. That is, that the resources humanity has and needs must be shared equitably. For instance, today each of us is called to promote the common good of social distancing by wearing masks, by washing our hands. These practices, like other forms of solidarity, are not only for our own good, but for the common good. In a moment, we'll begin by introducing our panel of moderators and guests, followed by a robust discussion that we've prepared. At 6:40, my co-host and I will ask our guests questions from the audience. The session this evening is not intended to be technical in nature. That is, we're not going to be spending time addressing specific questions about freshman move-in or how long your bed sheets need to be. Rather, we aim to spend time talking about your transition to Boston College, how we've prepared this transition through our formal orientation program, as well as what incoming students have to look forward to upon their arrival. Members of the audience are invited to pose questions before 6:40 p.m. Eastern Time via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Again, if you'd like our panelists to answer a question, we ask you to submit that question in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen no later than 6:40. We'd ask that when you do so, you please identify yourself by your name and your relationship to Boston College. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my co-host this evening, Kwasi Sardoki-Mensah.
Thank you, Grant. Hello, my name is Kwasi Sardoki-Mensah, Manager of Instructional Services at Boston College Libraries. I'm also an adjunct faculty at BC's Woods College of Advancing Studies. I'm happy to say that I've worked very closely with the Office of First Year Experience with the orientation and other programs since I joined BC in 1992. Now, it's my honor and privilege to introduce our guest. Mike Sako is our Executive Director, the Office of First Year Experience and the Center for Student Formation. Ali Bain Hammond is a Director of First Year Experience and Orientation. Aiden O'Neill is a sophomore in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences and a member of the Gabelli Presidential Scholars Program. And last but not least is Sebastian Kota, incoming member of the class of 2024, who has attended virtually every one of our Show at 6 programs this summer. We've invited him to participate in our panel. Before we get to our first questions, I'd like to ask Grant to set the stage by telling us a little bit about the Boston College class of 2024. Grant.
You know, Kwasi, we have, I think we in the admission office have one of the best jobs on campus. We have the privilege, really and the honor of getting to know students before they're even admitted to Boston College. My staff of about 30 reviewed about 30,000 applications this year from all 50 states from over 100 countries around the world. The class of 2024 is exceptional from top to bottom. 45 states and territories represented, almost 50 countries around the world in the freshman class alone. 35% of our students are HANA students, an acronym that many of you know we use at Boston College. Stands for African American, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American students. 15% of our students had a parent who attended Boston College, so long-standing affinity for this university. 2/3 of our students are enrolled in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences, 24% in the Carroll School of Management, 5% in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development, and just over 100 students, about 4% of our entering class in the Connell School of Nursing. So I can attest this is an exceptional class. We are so excited to meet those we've not yet met. This was a different type of a spring for all of us, and we didn't have the opportunity to meet many of these students in person this spring, but certainly from our interactions last fall and throughout the application process, this is going to be a class to be reckoned with.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thanks, Grant. So the next question is for Michael Ali. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced all of us to change how we run our lives. And I imagine the same is true surrounding the work you do. Could you tell us how this year's orientation program has been structured in the summer?
Sure, thanks, Kwasi. I can take that question. We start to prepare for our summer orientation season probably about a semester and a half before the summer ever gets here. It's probably late in the first semester that we start coordinating with our campus colleagues and our student leaders to kind of get ready to welcome the incoming class and their families. You're absolutely accurate when you say that when the shutdown happened and COVID flared up here in Massachusetts, that we had to rebuild and redo virtually every part of what we normally offer for our on-campus in-person orientation experience. It was important to BC, it was important to us that we retain the same spirit and the same level of individual attention that we usually give to our parents and our students. BC is unique in many ways when it comes to our summer program, that we have not only a 3-day on-campus program for our students, our entering students, but we invite their parents and guardians to also have their own separate program. And we wanted to keep the spirit of both of those programs alive. So we did it in 3 different phases. The first phase required us to go out and get an online platform, a brand new platform from a company out of Cleveland. It was called Wiser, but we branded it as our BC or My BC Orientation. So we invited a number of the faculty who are going to be advising the students, a number of our student affairs and our administrators from across campus to hop on and prepare this platform. So when we opened the gates to the freshmen, they were able to see a virtual Boston College with a number of communities that they could join, with ways that they could communicate with their new faculty, their new administrators, and most importantly, a way for them to connect in small groups with their new peers. We were lucky and we were able to keep all 42 of our orientation leaders. We made them the offer that if they decided that they didn't want to be an orientation leader over a virtual program, that's not what they sort of signed up for, but all 100% of them came back. And they had weekly meetings through the first phase, which was through June. So our student leaders held 158 small group meetings every week for 4 weeks. We commissioned a production company that's run by a BC alum out in California to create original content. So we created over 30 videos that were distributed throughout the summer. And through June, our students would watch videos and at their own pace. And then every week they'd get together with their orientation leader and meet their new friends. The second phase, briefly, was in July when we invited the students to have webinars very similar to what we're doing here on the show at 6. And they heard from offices ranging from their academic deans to the bookstore to student life. And we like to give them the opportunity to kind of interface with folks in person and not just over the platform. The second phase was also when we launched our own webinar program for the parents and guardians. So we had ourselves about 24 different webinars for our parents and guardians that answered a lot of those technical questions Grant mentioned at the beginning. How long is the bed, and how can what time do I get a move in, things like that. Lastly, and I'll end by saying that our third phase is the upcoming phase, where we're looking forward to welcoming the parents and the guardians and the students of the class of 2024 on the 25th and 26th of August. And we're gonna have some welcome opportunities for them. We had originally hoped to have one large event for all of our parents so we could kind of engage them as their students busied themselves in the residence halls. But the state of Massachusetts right now with the guidelines prohibits us from having a large gathering. So we'll have other opportunities for parents when they get to campus. Students will then just kind of go through the traditional weeks of welcome program as they matriculate and start their fall semester.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
So I just want to hop in there with a bit of a follow-up. So obviously the program that I went through last summer in person was quite different. And by next summer, we all hope and pray that we're able to, all be together physically again. But I was wondering, with the challenging the challenge that you all had of developing a virtual program, if there are any elements of that that you think might stick around that that really were excellent and went above and beyond what maybe you were hoping and might find their way into future orientation programming.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that one. Thanks, Aiden, for the question. I think in retrospect, looking back on these kind of crazy last few months as it's been, there really are a lot of silver linings, I think we would say, about how the program went down. As Mike was mentioning, in a typical year, we have this 3-day, 2-night orientation program for students and parents that happens over the course of the summer. And while we pack a lot into those 3 days, we're still limited by this period of time when students and families are with us on campus and then they're gone, right? They go back home. And this year it was different. This year we had the luxury of time. We weren't limited by time, and we didn't have to pack in presentations as we normally do. And as Mike mentioned, we were able to host like a few dozen kind of webinars, and also had this MyBC orientation platform where we could offer space and real estate, so to speak, to all of our campus partners who had information for students and who hosted virtual events, and students could engage on their own time and at their own convenience with a lot of the campus partners. So that whole the kind of framework for our virtual programming, I think in some ways was more convenient for families than it has ever been before, and certainly allowed us to introduce many more resources and opportunities to students, and not have to kind of play the gatekeeper game of who gets to be a part of the presentation this year for orientation. So that was really a nice silver lining for us. Another success I would mention too were the orientation group meetings themselves. And of course, Mike and I weren't in them. Sebastian, you were, and perhaps we can hear a little bit about what your experience was too soon. But, each of the first year students had 4 Zoom meetings with their orientation group and their OL, their orientation leader. And while we trained the orientation leaders thoroughly on group facilitation, they were a bit nervous going into this, to be honest, because this was new territory for everybody. And the thing that they were most concerned about was that it would be crickets in their orientation Zoom meetings, and that students wouldn't participate, and that the class of 2024 would be hesitant to kind of give themselves over to this experience. So needless to say, they were really thrilled to find out how open and engaged and willing to just kind of dive into this experience the class of 2024 was. So Grant, when you said this is a class to be reckoned with, my secondhand knowledge would confirm that, that the orientation leaders were really just kind of in awe of the class, and how from that first meeting, they really just participated, knowing full well that this wasn't the orientation program or really the start to college that anyone had imagined. So I think just the last thing I'd say as we think about kind of those parts of the program that were really wonderful, and Aiden, as you said, that might continue to be a part of future programming, were the webinars that Mike mentioned, in particular for our parents and guardians. Mike and I think, really cherish the relationships we're able to cultivate with parents during a traditional orientation session. And we wanted to make sure that parent programming wasn't just a passive experience. And I think we achieved that goal. I think through the webinars, people were able to ask questions live, and then we were able to continue conversations offline and email or by phone with parents. I was talking to a parent last week who said, picked up the phone and she said, "Allie, I feel like I know you because I've been on these webinars with you." And I was like, that's great. That's what we're going for, because it's that partnership that is so valuable to us at BC and is so entrenched in the way that we do things, and that we really, we're striving in the ways that we were able to kind of preserve that this year. So those are just some of the areas I would say that, we're kind of these happy surprises that we encountered along the way.
That's awesome.
Sebastian, I'm just curious, maybe you can chime in there. What were some of the highlights for you going through this experience this summer?
For me, first of all, I had to pick a time and day of when I'd be available during the summer. And based on that, I was placed in an orientation group with the orientation leader. And so we met once a week for 4 weeks. And within those Zoom meetings, we would talk about life at BC, academics, and my orientation leader would just talk about like the experiences, and we had the chance to ask a lot of questions. But then we also really used the Wiser platform where we were able to join a lot of communities, which included like my orientation group, like the HANA Center, first generation students, and even school specific, like I joined the Lynch School community. And so a lot of discussions were also made within those communities, and we had the chance to ask questions. And so also my orientation leader during the week, there'd be like a short video to watch, and then we would discuss that during our Zoom meetings on the weekends. And so there was just a lot of chance to ask questions. And then after that, going into phase 2, that's when a lot of the webinars were present. And so I know like one of the first ones was just talking about how BC would open during the semester, and just like a big overview of everything. And then from that, we had the chance to see different webinars on like student engagement and also more school specific webinars. And if you weren't able to make them, you could rewatch them because they were posted, the recordings. And even during that time, my orientation leader also reached out to us and said, oh, if you still have any questions, you can ask me, and even offer drop-in hours, and also just like small suggestions like, oh, these are like my favorite places to eat around BC. So the orientation leaders really went out of their way to really help us out and give us the chance to ask a lot of questions. So those were some of the highlights for my orientation.
Sounds great, Sebastian. Let me shift gears a little bit. Maybe Mike or Allie, one of you might be willing to comment. I mentioned up front that this session is called BC and the Common Good. And so I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about the common good, particularly as it relates to the timing of orientation this year. Because as I reflected on what transpired this spring, not only were we dealing with COVID-19, but we were just coming off the death of George Floyd and the racial tensions that really kind of bubbled up from that. And in a way, it was inspiring, despite it being so tragic, to see the support around the country for this movement. So I just wonder, in terms of Black Lives Matter, in terms of some of these things that we're dealing with as a nation around the injustices that are still present here, did that make its way into any of the conversations? Did it make its way into the groups, or how did it manifest itself in the program?
It did, yeah. Thank you, Grant. You know, our orientation leader training took place the last week of May and the first week of June, I think it was. So our training, which is kind of a really big piece of how we prepare for a summer of orienting our incoming students and families, very much overlapped with all of what you mentioned, and in particular the coverage of George Floyd's murder and this kind of cultural moment where institutionalized racism and police brutality and white supremacy really all came to the forefront of our national dialogue. And what was fortunate was that for our orientation leaders, they were able to talk to one another because we had them on live Zooms for 3 to 4 hours a day. And they were able to talk to one another, to us, and to leaders from across the university. You know, Grant, you spoke with them as well as a part of their training process. And they were able to engage in kind of repeated conversation about how they were feeling and processing all that was going on in our world, and still is. And most importantly, how they were going to do the important job of welcoming these new students during a time that was full of such frustration and anger and heartbreak for so many. And some of these conversations took place within dedicated time, existing time that was going to be dedicated to diversity and inclusion training specifically for the OLs. And some of it took place and really took precedence over other topics, you know, during components of their training that weren't dedicated to those topics, but just conversations with senior leaders who brought it up, or students who asked questions about it. And in both cases, I think that dedicated time to discuss the issues was really important to our entire team, and really helpful. I think the orientation leaders would tell you. In terms of the virtual orientation programming itself, we continued to prioritize diversity and inclusion content and conversations, just as we have for many years in the in-person program. That's always been such an important part of the program. It was obviously something that was going to stay with us in this virtual format. And so that included, you know, centering the voices of students from all sorts of underrepresented groups, and featured video content, including one video that I think is a real favorite of many, called the Identity Narratives, in which we had 5 of our orientation leaders tell their stories of transition through the lens of identity. And it was really just a beautiful, beautiful piece. We had the video production company that Mike mentioned literally hired people from in California and Dublin, Ireland to film our students in their home environments. So it was just a beautiful piece. So we had that video content. That video is one of a few videos that dealt with these topics specifically. And then one of the 4 orientation group meetings was exclusively focused on identity and inclusion at BC. And one of the activities students did during that meeting was they all went around and shared something that you couldn't tell by Zooming with me, was the name of the activity. So it's, just a reminder that at BC we talk about and celebrate the things that make us different. And so those are just a few of the ways I think all of those things that you mentioned kind of made their way into the orientation program this year, and for both orientation leaders and students themselves.
Aiden and Sebastian, while your orientation experiences were different, I imagine that many questions that incoming freshmen have this year will be similar to those that students had last year. So this is for Aiden. What is some advice that you have for students transitioning to college?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're all being inundated with lots of wanted and sometimes unwanted advice, but hopefully this can fall on the wanted side. But I'd say the biggest thing to keep in mind is that it's really easy. I felt that it was easy to feel like I was alone and as I was transitioning into college. But the great thing about coming into an awesome community like BC is that you're really not. And there are so many communities that are so excited to have you joining them, whether that be clubs that you go and join, whether that be your classes of students that are all going through the same thing as you. No one really comes into college, firing on all cylinders and having everything figured out. There's a learning process and there's a growth process, and that's really great. But it's really an awesome opportunity to look around, to realize that, oh yeah, we're all going through this crazy, sometimes hard, sometimes wonderful thing together with your fellow class of 2024 classmates, and have that experience, and to really make some awesome friends, some awesome bonds that will, they've lasted me this long so far, and I'm sure will much further. So yeah, I'd say just keep that in mind, that you're not alone. There are people from, upper class, well, not quite an upperclassman yet, but people who've already been around for a little bit, to faculty members, to especially the people that are coming in on the same plane as you. So yeah, that would be if I had to narrow down to one piece of advice, that would be it.
Great, thanks. That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
As we think about really the transition from orientation through the first year experience, we talk a lot about student formation at Boston College, and this being really something that distinguishes a Boston College education from so many others. I wonder if you might speak to some of the opportunities that await our incoming class once they arrive at BC, and how we might as a university work to really fulfill that mission we have to helping develop the whole person.
Great, yeah, I can answer that, Grant. Our department is called the Office of First Year Experience. It's not just the Department of Orientation. And sometimes people who engage with us over the summer may not realize that we do things throughout the entire first year of our students' career at BC to kind of support and help form them. In addition to FYE, I also have the luxury and privilege of overseeing an office called the Center for Student Formation. And many of our programs in student formation also focus on students in their first year. I can probably briefly highlight maybe 4 of them, just to kind of give the audience and the students a little idea of what they have to look forward to as they transition. One of the longest running programs in the student world is a program called 48 Hours. And that's been around for over 20 years. It's specifically designed for students in their first year, and it focuses on the transition. And, formerly, in all these years, we've loaded about 150 students on buses, and we've taken them to Cape Cod, and we spend a weekend where they are with their classmates, many of whom they haven't met yet because, we have 2,400 students in the class. But more importantly, they're with a bunch of upperclassmen who facilitate small groups. They give talks about their own experience of transition, whether it be the adjustment to academics, to social pressures, to how to make friends, to being homesick. And the program's been wildly popular because what happens, and this is just human nature, is that everybody thinks what they're going through is a solitary experience. And especially if you might not love BC right away, or you might have had some challenges, you don't maybe share that with your brand new friends that you just made. But we create these environments and that the students can feel safe, they can feel accepted, and they can be real and authentic. And it's been very, very popular over the years. We're keeping that up. Oftentimes I'll get questions about, well, what are you going to do now with all these, things of COVID and the event restrictions? We are open for business. We are still going to have the spirit of the 48 hours. We can't take 150 students to a hotel on the Cape, but we're going to be offering them on campus. We're going to still have the upperclassmen. We're still going to have small groups. I just got back yesterday from Home Depot where I bought outdoor carpet. We have canopy tents going up. We have camping chairs. The beauty of what we do is we bring people together to have authentic conversation in small groups. And COVID's not going to stop that. In addition to like the 48 hours weekend, BC is a very mentorship type culture. I think our students were really involved in high school and they continue that. They got here because of their investment of their parents and mentors they've had. And so we have 3 programs that specifically focus on first year students and giving them mentors. The first is called Compass. It's a program for first year AHANA students or students of color. It starts right away when they get to campus, and it pairs students with a small group of about 10 other students with upperclassmen mentors who meet weekly with them. They have almost a curriculum that they go through about transition. And it's just another way for students to feel supported and make new friends. In addition to Compass, we have 2 other large mentoring programs. One is called Ascend. It's for first year students who identify as women. And the other is called Freshman League. And it's the brother program of the Ascend. It's a first year program for students who identify as men. And they get upperclassmen and they can talk about issues through their lens of their own gender on campus. We give them a budget to go off campus and do things because we believe that we live in this world-class city, but sometimes BC can have a gravity unto its own. And so we like to take them out and have them go to different neighborhoods and try different kinds of food. And those programs are also very COVID friendly, if you will, because they're essentially just small groups of about 10 students in the first place. So we won't have to do very much at all to kind of recalibrate those to kind of go on through the first year. Those programs, and I'm going to stop talking here, those programs are just stuff that we offer. We're sister offices to campus ministry and student involvement and the student activities offices and student affairs. There's just a myriad of things that students can get involved with throughout their first year. The important piece of advice that I would give to at least the students on the program is to take initiative. No one's going to come to you and knock on your door and tell you to get involved. It's going to be you that has to reach out, and you might have to reach out in a different way this year because everything's so crazy. But I can promise you that if you do put a little bit of effort in, you'll reap the benefits of the BC community tenfold.
Great. So thanks, Mike. So I know you earlier on referred to working with the parents, but I just want to, we know that another critical component of orientation has always been the parents portion of the program. How has that gone? And then have the questions from parents this year focused more on COVID-19 than the typical orientation questions, or are parents still parents and then curious about the rites of passage of their children?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at that and let Mike opine too. I mean, in terms of your question, Kwasi, I think both. The logistical concerns with this year are really tremendous, and parents understandably have a lot of questions on top of the normal questions, right? To think about sending your student to college in this time, and to think about testing and travel requirements, there's a lot going on. And I think what has been really valuable in the last 5 or 6 weeks is the university's communication and kind of continuing the dialogue with parents. So a lot of those questions can get answered at the university level. But what I think is so common and so enduring about this process, of sending a child to college, as much as I can understand it, having never done it myself, is that it's just a transition for the whole family. And so and those that the act of sending your student to college in a pandemic or not, you're still going to have a lot of the same concerns, right? And how are they going to make friends? And how are they going to know if their classes are a right fit for them? And how do they seek supports when it's not? And so all of those same kind of concerns about their well-being academically and co-curricularly, socially, spiritually, I think are the same this year as they've always been. And it's truly a privilege for us to be able to help, answer some of those questions and help families navigate that together. Mike, I'm not sure if you'd add anything.
Yeah, I would say that my impressions of the summer is the first questions are logistically based, and that makes sense. You want to know what you need to do to prepare, what are the different rules, and in our life these days, everything keeps changing in real time. I think as we get closer to opening and a lot of those kind of answers have been provided, I was on the call this morning with a parent who had just the general question and concern about their student. The student wasn't an entering student, but like any student, they kind of go through different phases of development and growth in college. And we talked a lot about getting involved and how the student perhaps was different than they were in high school and their interests were changing. And, that's a wonderful part of our jobs, is that we get really to be in partnership with parents and share some of our lessons that Allie and I have been here a long time. I've been here at 25 years at BC, and the insights and just the reassurance that we can give to the community to say, you know what, you think that your students like unusual because they're playing a lot of video games. Guess what? They're not. They're a sophomore. Sophomores play video games. Now, if it stops at the video games, that's a piece of concern. But go ahead and we can talk about strategies of engaging the student to get involved in some of these programs we've talked about. But by and large, once we get the logistical stuff taken care of, the students still are students. They're still wonderful. They still have the natural growing up to do.
That's great.
Sebastian, you mentioned a little bit ago about some of the groups that you've formed within the Wiser platform, and it was really encouraged to see that. What have been some of your takeaways from those groups? Are you finding other students that have similar interests and passions that you have through that format, or are there other ways that you've connected with other fellow classmates already?
Yes, actually, on some of the discussions, I know I joined the pre-health community as well. So there's some people, because I want to be pre-med, and so those are some of the people that I've sort of connected with. And I also, you can sort of search up who comes from what city or like what state. So I know, I come from Los Angeles, so I try to see, who comes from Los Angeles is in the entering class. So that's sort of one way that you could sort of see other people. I know personally, I'm a first generation student, so I did the BC First transition program, and that's really where I found a lot of my community. And I've been engaged with that a lot, especially in the past few weeks. So I've been able to find a lot of classmates and people who are like similar to me, and also my roommate is in that program. So there's been a lot of ways for me to sort of meet others despite everything being virtual.
It's good to hear. I ask that because one of the things whenever I talk to students as they're going through the college process, and I ask them if they have any apprehensions at all. I mean, there's a lot of excitement about going to college, but it's a bit of a scary time too. They almost always talk about their concern that they won't make friends, right? They all had friends in high school. They're likable people. This idea of once I get somewhere else, maybe I won't. Aiden, can you speak to that? What was it like being a freshman last year and kind of moving into a new environment, not knowing many people?
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of the many challenges and opportunities that you get when you start a new year. I would say that for me, the biggest group of people where I made lots of friends and eventually some really close friends, my best friends now, are in the theater, and that's kind of the extracurricular activity that I spend the most time doing. I'm in a student theater group and did the theater department shows. And the people I met through that, and as far as, working on one thing together, I made some really awesome friends. And I think the moral of the story from that, and maybe if if theater isn't your thing, if it is, great, I can't wait to meet you. But if it's something else, I would say the moral is, like Mike said, to go out and to take the initiative and to get involved in things. And I know that, especially with COVID things, like from a theater perspective, or whether you would think about joining a dance troupe or, a sport that maybe might be a little harder to do in this COVID era, that everyone on campus, we're all getting creative about ways that, even from a student group perspective, that we're able to keep going and make cool and interesting stuff. So if that's holding you back, worried that maybe it might not be everything that you thought it would be because of COVID, know that all of us who are on the other end are super excited to have you join us, and can't wait to have a new influx of people, and we're all working really hard to make sure that our clubs get to do as close to normal and even new and exciting things that we wouldn't have gotten to do before in this COVID time. So yeah, that's you'll probably make friends on your floor. Hopefully things will go well with your roommate and you'll be good friends with your roommate. But I'd say the biggest spot you can make friends is those clubs and activities and things like that. So yeah, definitely go out, get involved in those ones.
One of the things that I always watch as well is students come in and they're, joining all sorts of clubs or maybe theater or things that they really have done in high school, but they're also able to take on new roles and eventually get into leadership roles. And one of those leadership roles really is the OL and the orientation leaders that work with you, Mike and Allie, in your programs. How do you select student leaders? What are the things that you look for as these new students are coming in? What should they be thinking about as they're thinking about their 4 years and their own development? Are there certain pieces of advice you might give?
Yeah, that's it's a great question. Applying to be an OL is a big commitment. We don't make it easy in some ways. There are essays, a group interview, an individual interview, and that's because it's a really big commitment. Whether we're doing a virtual program as we have this summer or a traditional in-person programming. But one thing that's been really important to our office is kind of to dispel this idea that being an orientation leader or being any sort of student leader, I think on our campus, that there's like kind of a perfect student for that role, right? Because that's just not true. And sometimes we know through doing this work for so many years when first year students come in the summer and normally they see orientation leaders in their polos all put together and with this resume of things that they do and do well, it just seems like, wow, how am I ever going to get from A to B? How am I ever going to get from here to there and have this full and rich life on our campus? And we want to make sure that we're making sure that those student leaders, when they're applying years later for this role, remember that and say, remember how it feels to kind of be a freshman and to look at you and think that the upper class students have it all together, when we know that's not true, right? So that's kind of part of the framework and philosophy that really informs everything we do with the orientation leader process, and certainly the selection process. As Mike mentioned, the 42 students who were offered the job this year accepted the role the day before the university closed for the semester, right after spring break. And then everyone's world turned upside down, and it was another few weeks after that until we knew about kind of how we would be rolling out the summer orientation program, and before we could offer these students a revised job description, which we did. And so when they all accepted, we were really in awe of them, and it says a lot to kind of who they are and who BC students are and how much they care about helping the incoming class and doing this good work. so yeah, they showed a lot of resiliency and flexibility and optimism in the face of all of this, and have continued to. And yeah, it's a role that's available every year, and it's a great one. It's definitely a job. You know, it's compensated, and in a normal summer you live on campus, and there are a couple of different roles, like Grant through your office as well. The SAP students in the summer live on campus, but there's a lot of great opportunities during the school year too. All those programs Mike mentioned, at the core of them, they are, you know, they utilize typically junior and senior leaders to tell their stories and facilitate small groups. So it's definitely wonderful opportunities. And the best way to get a preview is to participate in the programs themselves, and then see, then maybe try on the leadership role for size later. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's start taking some questions from the audience, but knowing that Sebastian has been here all summer and I think has asked more questions than just about anyone in the audience, maybe I'll give you the chance to ask the first question.
Thank you. So my question is, what is one of the ways that BC will help to bring students together upon their arrival in the first few weeks?
Sure. Yeah, we'd be happy to answer that question. We know it's top of mind for all students right now as the countdown is on, right? I was looking at the calendar. I was like, okay, we're all going to be together in 3 weeks. This is happening. So one of the wonderful things about BC, and Mike alluded to this as well, is that when it comes to kind of programming for first year students, we are not the only office that does that, which is great. It means that there's a lot of kind of good heads that come together to create opportunities for students. And our colleagues in the Division of Student Affairs and the Vice President for Student Affairs office actually coordinate what is called Weeks of Welcome at BC. We got away from this idea of Welcome Week being just this finite number of days and expanded it to Welcome Weeks, because really throughout the first few weeks of the semester, there's so many different programs that are included in kind of this the start of the semester, particularly for first year students. So this year, you know, I think most students know things will be a little bit different than maybe they normally are, right? We're not, well, the first few days of the semester often involve students coming together and as a whole class and Conti Forum a few different times. That just can't happen this year. But our colleagues in Student Affairs are working really hard to think about and plan for ways that all of those programs will be amended. And I know if it's not up already, I think they're going to be releasing a Weeks of Welcome schedule quite soon. One thing that you'll find in that schedule that I really want to make sure we highlight is that there's going to be an opportunity for every first year student to meet in person with their orientation group and their orientation leader. And that will happen the weekend before classes begin. So students will move in that Wednesday and Thursday, and they'll be tested and get their negative results back, I'm sure. And then they'll have some space to meet in person with their groups, mostly on that Saturday. So you'll get your super fan shirt at that meeting and see your orientation leader in person and your other group members, and we're really looking forward to kind of that reunion happening there. There's also another in-person kind of gathering that will happen the day prior. That's for the Diversity EDU Reflections, which is one of the pre-matriculation modules that all students have received word about and should be completing over these intervening weeks. But other than that, there's a lot of kind of different programming they're trying. I think there's going to be virtual trivia. There'll be advising sessions during this time too. So some important things and to-do list items to check off or to get ready for classes that Monday. So a lot of different things. And you'll be moving in and, you know, getting your dorm set up and meeting your roommate and floor mates and all that good stuff. So it's a busy few days, but as it always is. And it will be this year as well.
So there is a question here for Aiden. Was there anything the professor did early in the fall semester last year that was especially helpful or unhelpful?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. I was lucky to have several great professors last fall. I guess one thing that was really awesome was from my English professor, Professor Klein. I'm not sure if you're here, probably not, but if you ever see this, shout out to you, is just how flexible she was through that first semester, as far as the way the class worked and handing stuff in. And it was kind of her policy that if you get in a crazy time and you need an extra day to write this paper or something like that, and you come and talk to me about it, then yes, the answer is yes. You just have to come, let me know, keep the line of communication open. But she was just awesome in being so flexible, which was really great in that first semester when, like we know, everything is flying at you from every different direction. And sometimes that day or two of flexibility from Professor Klein was absolutely huge in keeping up my all my workload over a bunch of classes, and all the things I was trying to get involved with, and my mental health and all that stuff. So that flexibility, I imagine that will only be more important now in the when we're dealing with going from online and hybrid and all that stuff. So yeah, I would say the most helpful thing was that flexibility there in the first semester.
Okay, but what about the unhelpful part?
I don't know. I don't have anything specific on
Okay,
it.
well, you're just checking to make sure. Thanks, Eden.
Sebastian, maybe there's another question here from philosophy professor Holly Vanderwall, who is wondering, is there anything that you wish you could hear from your professors as you get ready to start the semester?
Well, as I come in, I know that this is a different academic environment from high school. So one of the things that I'd like to hear is, what are the ways that the courses are going to proceed? How does the grading work? Because I imagine that it's a lot different. And how should you manage your time differently? How is the material going to be? Because it's obviously like a very big change from high school. So just, I guess, some tips on what we should expect and how to approach the course as we enter our first semester as first years.
Professor Tom Childs, Vice Provost for Research and Academic Planning, has a question for you, Mike. How important is it for students to establish mentoring relationships with faculty members?
I think it's crucial. In fact, if we had a on-campus orientation like we normally do, I'm lucky enough to give the final words of wisdom to the parents and the students. And Aiden, you might remember when you came last year, oftentimes I'll give a little story about when I was in college and how I met my mentor. And I use the phrase, the doorway dance, where I was a timid little freshman and I was a faculty member who knew everything I could ever think of. He was brilliant. And I was intimidated, but also intrigued. And so what I did is I kind of garnered some courage. And one day after class, I would go and I kind of just stood in the doorway and I kind of hovered. And I had the ability to ask a few questions, and we sort of just kind of struck up a relationship from there. And it served me well all through college and even after college. And I do that talk, and I even do a little waddle to simulate a doorway dance, because much like getting involved in informative and extracurricular activities, reaching out to the faculty members and letting them know that you're intellectually curious about something, or that you're just going through something, that you're homesick or you're struggling in class. It doesn't have to be a positive thing. You'll find that BC is a place that attracts people who want to work like this and be in relationships, mentor relationships with students, and they're ripe for it. And so I often say that, I make a joke that no faculty member is going to come to your dorm room and knock on your door. That would be weird. But if you find this year, as you kind of matriculate, even as a sophomore, we don't talk often enough, I think, about our returning sophomores and how disruptive their experience was, having been ripped out of BC in the middle of March, where you were many times just getting your footing at that point. That's just when things started to fire, But to go up and add a class, or if you're on a virtual class, send them a message and just make an appointment for a Zoom or have them go for a walk with a cup of coffee. You'll find that it's a lot easier than you think, because most faculty love it and they look forward to this type of relationship. So I thank you for the question, Tom, and I think it's pivotal. I would just add to that, we have a number of programs where the Center for Student Formation will do the work for you. So we have a program called Halftime, in which students usually go on their sophomore or junior year. And we invite about 10 faculty to go on the retreat with the students. And that's a wonderful structured way to meet faculty and staff and get insights and kind of hear their own story of their own transition. Thanks.
And I've done halftime, and I love halftime.
You're great. We love having you, Kwasi.
Yeah, and just to go off that briefly from student perspective, what Mike was saying, definitely that's another thing that I would say was huge from faculty in the first semester was, it really is true that BC professors are excited to, not just engage in, well, very much excited to engage in, questions about the class and about the material. And, that's huge, obviously, why they're there, but also anything else that might be going on. And yeah, definitely going to the office hours are huge, and I would definitely recommend going to them.
So we have a question from Professor Kathy Bailey from Political Science Department, and she says, one of my favorite BC traditions is freshman convocation, welcoming the incoming freshmen. Can you talk about how you choose the speaker and then the common text that the students have to read? And you want to talk a little bit about how it's going to look like this year? I know you referred to it before, but.
Yeah, sure. Convocation is a wonderful tradition that's developed at BC over the last 15 or 20 years. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's coupled with a ritual we call First Flight, where we invite the entire first year class to gather together and share in a picnic or a meal and gather on the quad. And then they process down Linden Lane, and a number of faculty and members of the Jesuit community will issue them a charge to go set the world aflame. And they then process by Residence Hall down the steps into Conti Forum, and they hear a lecture by an author for the first year common read. A lot of schools have a first year common read program. We're unique and distinct that we have this Jesuit centered charge where the faculty and staff engage with the students. It's been a lot of fun, and it's just a wonderful evening for everyone. How the books are selected, it's not FYE's sole choice. We don't do it. We don't pick. I don't pick the book. We have input from senior leadership, and they're from everyone from the deans to the vice presidents to even Father Leahy weigh in on what might be a topical or a good book to kind of use at this certain point in history. This year, we were lucky to get a book called Born to Run, which is a autobiography of Bruce Springsteen, who is a parent of BC alum. His son Evan was here. He lived in the residence hall when I was on campus years ago. And the author is the person who then speaks to the incoming class. We are in conversations right now with Bruce Springsteen's family and his agent and his people to figure out what approach is going to be best this year. I can say that unfortunately, gathering 2,400 students on the quad and having them jumbled together to walk down is not going to happen. So we do know that the first flight portion of convocation won't be taking place this year. We hope to have some type of event that would hopefully include Bruce Springsteen. We're working with the Commonwealth and with Bruce, like I said, to figure out what is possible. That would be scheduled to happen on September 10th. If it does happen, we should know in the coming weeks, though, if it's going to have to be recalibrated, what that will look like, and we'll certainly communicate it to everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Well, I know people have questions and other types of conversations, but I have to say that we have to end our program. And I'm so very grateful for everyone. So as we conclude tonight's program, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and our guests for their insightful comments this evening, and to thank my co-host, Grant Gosselin. Thank you, Grant. Thanks, everyone. Before I end, I'd like to introduce the next program within our Show at 6 series, which will take place this coming Tuesday evening, August 11th at 6 o'clock. Tuesday's program, called Celebrating Pulse, will showcase one of BC's premier service learning programs. Our panel will feature Megan Sweeney, CUNY Family Director of the Pulse Program for Service Learning and Associate Professor of the Practice of Theology, Shanteri Baliga, Assistant Director of the Pulse Program for Service Learning, Nimsu Eng, Class of 2022, and Justin Schnebelin, Class of 2021. The program will be hosted by Burton Howell, Executive Director of our Intersections Program, and Mary Troxell, Associate Professor of the Practice Philosophy. You need to register for each segment you want to attend. As you know, registration is very, very brief, but each segment has a different webinar link. So please check out our webpage, bc.edu/show@6, and see the next segments. While you are there, check out our archives where all our previous segments are posted. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've enjoyed engaging with you and look forward to seeing you again very soon. Be well, stay safe, and good night from Boston College.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.